Okay, the Cleveland Browns lose 23-10 to the Cincinnati Bengals, and there is a lot to talk about in this one, so let's get right to it. Bree, how do we feel coming out of this one? The Browns are out of the playoffs, which, I don't know how much we really thought they were in them, but nevertheless, they're out. They lose this game. Where are we at?
Wow, Pete, just really hitting with the hard hitters right out of the gate. Can't even give me a little bit of hope to hang on to. 0.4% chance.
I would. We'll get to that. There is hope. I actually do have. I'm. If you're characterizing how I feel coming, I'm very optimistic coming out of this game. But go ahead.
So, okay, I feel like there's a lot to unpack.
Right.
Not even just from this game specifically, but some events maybe leading up to this game, and obviously, division rival, the Bengals. Joe Burrow had never beaten the Browns. You heard all about it. Deshaun Watson's second game, coming off of Baker Mayfield making his debut in a Rams uniform. We'll get into all of that later. But there was just a lot leading up to this game. I think just a lot of pressure overall on the Browns for whatever reason. And I think pressure from like a fan base perspective, not necessarily like I have no idea what's happening internally, but the fans, I think, were holding out hope that we really were going to just win out. And I was actually kind of preparing myself to get like fully blown out in this game.
Yes.
Like I am pretty optimistic. You know that. Like I'm very much a positive person. I will continue rooting for this team. I will latch onto any glimmer of hope. But I actually said to my husband right before the game, like, this feels like it's going to be like a complete disaster for the Browns. It just felt like the Bengals had been playing really, really well, since they last met them on the 31st of October. That was a long time ago. They've been playing really good football. Joe Burrow looks obviously a lot better than he did when we played against him the first time, and even how he started the season. Their defense had been playing really well. And it just felt like this was finally going to be the time that they were going to get the monkey off of their back and beat the Browns. Like, I just felt like they had more things going for them, more momentum. And this Browns team just feels like we are not in that same place. We are a team that has made it 3/4 of a way through a season and plugged in a brand new quarterback. And the defense is pretty much in shambles. And I just felt like I just don't know how you compare those two situations and think that things were going to go in our direction.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. The Bengals have not lost since Halloween. Yeah. They've been really, really good. They've been better on offense. Their defense has gotten better. And the Browns, I would say the Browns have gotten better on defense. I would say, and it I don't know if it pains me, but I'm just shocked that I am saying this, that in the past 3 games, the Browns have been better than the other team on special teams. That the way the season is going, where they were basically the worst in the league, that is surprising. But that doesn't change the fact that Joe Burrow is arguably playing at the peak of Joe Burrow powers compared to Deshaun Watson, who is playing that Houston game we just saw, where it was awful and he was way better. And it was still not close to the level Burrow is currently playing at. And I think when you look at those things and you go, all right, you can sort of talk yourself into the idea, well, the Browns defense has played the Bengals well. And for the most part, they continued to play the Bengals well. But there was this feeling that even though the Browns were getting stops, the Bengals were eventually going to find a way, and you weren't as convinced that the Browns were going to find a way.
Yes. So, Pete, it reminded me a little bit of like the Buffalo game, kind of how that started, where the defense comes up with like really good stops, like holding them to 3 and outs. And that's kind of how this game started too. And I remember thinking during the Buffalo game, same thing that I felt like in watching this team play Cincinnati, like this isn't going to last the whole game. There's only going to be so much that this defense can do to keep Joe Burrow and the Bengals off the field. Like, they weren't going to shut them down for 4 quarters. Like, that just wasn't going to happen.
Now, I don't know if I would say talked myself into this, but I did sort of have the thought that if the Browns could hang around long enough, I felt like maybe Deshaun Watson was going to gain comfort as the game went along, and that would sort of help. And that happened.
Yeah.
But it just, again, not enough. And a lot of that, some of that was Deshaun not playing peak Deshaun football, though he did have some really good moments. But a lot of that was just the Bengals kicked the Browns' ass up front all day long. DJ Breeder killed the Browns almost by himself. 340 pounds. He looked like a bear in the woods, just pounding through poor Danish Hjaldi Froholt. It was awful. And the Browns up front just got demolished across the board. And you're sitting there going, Nick Chubb gets that 13-yard run. And you're like, oh, all right, maybe they're going to get this going. He had 21 yards the rest of the game. And like, what sort of impressed me about that was the fact that Nick Chubb had 34 yards and the Browns still had chances to win this game. And you look at the score, and we can get into this weird alternate universe that apparently you and I live in, that's contrasted against the one that other people live in, which has the world ending constantly. To me, I was sitting there going, this was, God loved Jacoby Brissett, and we'll get to that. He was going to die in this game. The way it was going, just because there was, you saw why Deshaun Watson was acquired. Like some of the stuff, he was evading pressure, he was avoiding sacks, he's able to get out of the pocket. And Brissett has some mobility, but ultimately he's like a trebuchet back there. He's trying to hold his ground and fling the ball around. And that wasn't going to work in this game. And not having Chubb be able to give you any space, it was going to be really, really challenging. And like, that was the point where you're sitting there going, and it's not Brissett's fault. It's just how the offensive line has sort of deteriorated over the last month, is that it got to a point where you're just like, I understand how good Brissett has been for this team, but it's over based on where the rest of this team is. So that to me was interesting. So to say Nick Chubb is going to get 34 yards and you still had a shot to contend in this game, to me was a monstrous step forward in terms of where Deshaun is, what this team wants to be, and where they can go from here. That to me was enormous.
Yes. I mean, do we want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Yes, we do. So 4th and 1.
Yeah.
At the 25-yard line.
First quarter.
It's the first quarter, the first offensive drive. Mm-hmm. The Browns could have kicked what would have been a 42-yard field goal with Cade York. Instead, they bring in Jacoby Brissett as they had done the week before in a 4th and 1 situation. And this time, the Browns lined up 10 in the box, which prompted the Bengals to line up 9 in the box. They had 6 up. DJ Reader like breathing down Hjaldi Froholt. Everybody had up across the board. They had the flanks covered as well. Like they were outside the tight end. So there was nowhere to go. They showed like Brissett could sneak just as they had done the week before, but smartly, this was not going to work if they tried to rush him. Right. And according to Stefanski, he had the option to sneak. And I think that's getting lost in this. That was, he could have done that.
Jacoby could have, he could have
just,
okay.
Yes, he had the ability to call and just go for the sneak. And I think wisely he didn't. He drops back to pass. He tries to hit Donovan Peoples-Jones on the fade in the corner. It's not a very good ball. And Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't look like he got a good look at it, but it was open. These things were open. Like that was my biggest takeaway from this, is all these people are losing their minds, including my co-host. I don't know about losing her mind, but I believe what she said is, I'm perplexed. I'm perplexed.
Is that what I said?
Yes.
I remember.
I'm
I blocked out.
The ball hit the ground and there are some very reasonable people I see who cover this stuff who were like, you can't do that. You absolutely cannot do that. And I'm sitting here going, what? Why not? And you're in that again, perplexed.
So let me explain like what was going through my mind in that specific instance. I was not necessarily mad at the play call per se, because I am someone that does like being aggressive. Like I'm okay with Kevin Stefanski being aggressive like that. That does seem to be.
I loved him in the press conference. That was great. I mean,
it does seem to be his MO. Like none of us should be surprised at this point in going for it on 4th down. I guess where I was at was, again, I've talked about this. I've been pretty consistent. I don't understand why he just didn't have Deshaun try to execute that play. And now I will say, like, going off of the week prior, I can see why, because
Yeah,
everything was off target, and maybe he trusted Jacoby to make the play more than Deshaun Watson. But that's where I think I was a bit perplexed and like taking him off the field. Now they probably practiced it this way, right? All throughout.
of course. Like this.
So,
yes, this is how this works.
yeah. So I understand that. I guess as I had more time to think about it, the other reason why I didn't love the situation was just what we talked about, Pete, is I'm okay with the aggressive play call. I just don't think this team right now is good enough to take those gambles and risks because we can't seem to dig ourselves out of holes or we make too many mistakes on either side of the ball, on special teams, wherever. You can look on all sides. And I just feel like if we don't hit that play, if you hit that play, home run, right? Like Kevin Stefanski's a genius, but like putting Jacoby
it goes
in there.
so far. It was Jacoby Brissett's birthday.
Yes,
people would have lost their minds.
Exactly. It would have been amazing if it would have worked out.
Yes.
And that's typically how things go.
Yes,
if it
that's
works
the
out,
deal. That's
he's
the
a
deal.
hero.
Kevin Stefanski knows it.
Yeah,
like, he's
and
not going to pretend otherwise.
Blows up in his face. And that's what happened. And so I think for me, like that's where I'm just right now kind of questioning some of these decisions just based on this team like not really being good enough. Like maybe a few games down the line as Deshaun gets more comfortable in this offense and the team starts to click a little bit better, then I probably won't be as mad because I feel like there is that chance of like, okay, no big deal. You turn the ball over on downs. It's still really early on in the game. There's a lot of chances left. But just knowing how the offense looked the week prior, I just was a little bit confused by that. Not saying that a field goal was a guaranteed either, because that wasn't. Like they're really, like when you look at this team, there's no guarantees. And I guess that's part of the problem.
That is part of the problem. Now, my question to you is you're saying the Browns are not good enough right now to do it. And I don't disagree with you in that sense. But my question to you is, isn't that all the more reason to do it?
Fair. I think where I was at was with just being up against the Bengals and Joe Burrow specifically, and I know that offensive drive was coming off of holding them on a 3-and-out. I just felt like the momentum swing, even that early on, like for this team, just felt like it would have been too much. Now, granted, like they held them right after that, right?
That's important. That's very important.
So, in the moment, like I'm thinking that, but in looking at it in hindsight, like it actually wasn't that big of a deal because they went out and stopped them. I mean, yeah, I don't know, Pete, like I guess I'm going to continue to want to push for him to be aggressive because like I think I'd rather have an aggressive head coach than someone that's more conservative. But it feels like more often than not, this team isn't able to execute. And I think that's where I get stuck with it all.
I noticed nowhere in your very well-reasoned argument did you mention that Jacoby Brissett was cold or any of the other nonsense I've seen people come up with to complain about this. To your point, you mentioned it, and it's absolutely true. The Browns practiced this all week. Jacoby Brissett was not like, oh, I'm going in.
Shocked.
We're doing this. Like, this is nonsense. People are like, he's cold off the bench. He was warming up. Deshaun Watson at that point had thrown 3 passes. It wasn't as if like there was some massive thing. Jacoby Brissett knew what was coming. Deshaun Watson knew what was coming. They were going to get in this situation. They were going to bring in Jacoby Brissett and they were going to run this play. Not only
Wait a minute. Can I pause you there?
Yeah.
So 2 things. I guess first, fine, whatever. They had this play drawn up for Jacoby Brissett. I guess I just would have rather have had Deshaun Watson be the one to do it.
And that's fair.
Have him throw it and miss. I guess I feel maybe that actually would have been worse though, Pete. Can you imagine?
That's my other point. Had they done that and he missed, it would have
been like, why didn't you put Jacoby in for that play?
Well, it would be, why are we doing that play with a rusty quarterback? Because this was 3 passes into the game. He hadn't sort of like. So that's the thing is like, I agree with you. I think to your point of saying I'd rather have Watson do it. I think in 2 weeks that is Watson's play.
Yep.
I think for this, what the Browns calculated, and they were right based on what the Bengals did, was, and just like against the Houston Texans, Jacoby Brissett lines up under center on 4th and 1. You have to account for the fact that he can dive forward. He's just too damn big. He's a giant human being.
He's a beast.
So, and again, they got exactly that look. They got 9 in the box. The 3 linebackers are crammed in right behind the 6 men on line of scrimmage. They had 1 corner and 1 safety back. That was it. So, if you're saying,
did the Browns also get a really crappy spot on this possession?
They not well, they may have on this one. They definitely got one later, but they got the first down anyway. They do all that. They got the exact look they wanted. They got the exact sort of get off and release that they wanted. DPJ was open. Like, that's the thing. It wasn't as if like he threw it and there was nothing there. Like, people go like, this is the pantheon of bad trick plays. Like, you want the pantheon of bad trick plays? It was poor
execution.
Miles Garrett
once again,
sacked Jamar Chase. That is a bad trick play. This was a shot play with a person who is throwing the ball, who started for you for 11 weeks, who played good football by all accounts, who threw to a guy who's been making plays for you all week, and they didn't execute. And like, that's the thing. You don't make it, you get criticized. That's how it works. If he makes it, Jacoby Brissett's 30th birthday, he gets to throw a touchdown. He gets to contribute to this game. It's this glowing story. Oh, it's so great. Everybody loves it. But that's the deal. You don't make it. That's what happens. And he acknowledged as such. And there's a part of me that wishes Kevin Stefanski had a little more Tomlin in him, because Tomlin laughs at this type of stuff.
Right.
But I see a little bit more of sort of like, I'm doing this stuff. Why do you keep asking about this? We're doing this and we're going to keep doing this. And as Deshaun gets more comfortable, they're going to do it more. They're not going to do it less. And by more, I mean they're going to start going for 2-point conversions more, because the offense they're trying to install with Watson is a pain in the ass to deal with in the red zone, because he can just fake a handoff and run it in. Like, there's so much to this, but like, people are losing their minds over this stuff. And then like, you look up the numbers, the team that has attempted the most field goals this season is the Pittsburgh Steelers with 33. The Browns have attempted 26. Like, they're in the middle of the pack. It's not like Cade York is like not gotten to kick field goals, or that the Browns don't kick field goals. You would think, and I actually thought it was going to be like this when I looked it up, that they were going to be near the bottom, and it's just not the case. So the other part of this is like, I keep hearing this about momentum, and you and I have talked about this. The players are wired for this stuff at this point. They do it all the time. It's normal for them. And I think we've seen in some situations it pays off. I think it paid off later in this game with some of the conversions they made, where it felt like, oh, just 5 yards to get it. Okay, let's go get it. And they did. I think it's a momentum killer for fans. I think that's the people who are like crushed.
I also feel like the narrative of fans is that Kevin Stefanski gets too cute and he like outsmarts his opponent. Do you hear that? Like, that's like what I see a lot of people arguing with themselves on, is that Kevin Stefanski is trying to outsmart his opponent, but is really outsmarting himself, which I also like find fascinating to like look in on these discussions that are happening. Yeah.
So like I said, in like another 2 weeks, or even this week, that should be Watson making that throw. Absolutely. Yeah. For this week, I get it. Sort of, because for the exact reason, the immediate reaction I thought that was going to have, he's rusty. Not to mention, the other part of this is Watson is not, at least if you're running it the way the Browns did, Watson is adjusting to being an under center quarterback. This is not something he has done much of. At Clemson, he was always in the gun. In Houston, he was always in the gun. He's doing more under center stuff, but even we saw this against the Houston Texans on the one play. He pulled out early with no snap. Like, if that happens on this play, what is everybody going to do? They're going to lose their mind. Now, they do convert a play later in the game on 4th and 1 where he's in the gun, but for the play they drew up, Brissett was probably the right man for the job. In a couple of weeks, I want Watson making that throw, but in this moment, Brissett's a tool you have on this team. They could have made a play, didn't. It was hardly the end of the world. And as you pointed out, the defense immediately gets a stop and they got a ball back. So maybe they get 3 points. But this idea that like that was going to change the whole flow of the game, it just didn't matter in that respect. It didn't change anything from that. But the other thing that came up out of this game, there were a lot of weird conversations coming out of this. Jason Lloyd wrote an article for The Athletic, and I touched on this when I wrote about it, calling what was it? Not doubling Jamar Chase, like crippling for the defense. Did you feel crippled? Did you feel that the defense was crippled by not doubling Jamar Chase in this game?
Not necessarily. I guess I was surprised though with how early on Boyd and Higgins essentially like were out of this game.
Yes, it was quick.
Yeah, that like it feels like whenever we play the Bengals, things like this happen where where the Browns tend to not like fall into luck, but it always feels like in some ways against the Bengals, like things seem to kind of go their way in situations like this. So when that happened, I immediately was like, oh, wow, like this game, went from me feeling like before it even started to it being a blowout to, hey, like this game actually might be winnable because it feels like we'd be able to put more focus on Jamar Chase. So I guess I was surprised at the end with how many catches he had. But he also is a really good player. So like,
there is that.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess like, and Joe Burrow, some of the throws he was making to him, I mean, you have to give them credit too. Like they are really good players. They also get paid in this league. Like some credit goes to them. But no,
I think that's big, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say that the defense felt crippled by Jamar Chase and not double teaming him.
So here's the thing. I think it was a reasonable point to make to say they should have done more, even if it was just situationally to say,
yeah, just like adjustments, something.
Just key situations to do more than they did. But when you go back and you look at how the game went, the two drives that they scored on, the first one they had, what was it, 53? Wait, trying to think. Was it 53 yards in penalties? And then one pass to Jamar Chase, which was in between Denzel Ward and John Johnson. They had two guys there and just didn't. It just wasn't enough. Jamar Chase caught it like he didn't know it was there. It was like a reflex, which is just a great play. But that's the one catch he had on that whole drive. And we can talk about the officials. Obviously the roughing the kicker thing was easy. Obvious call. Was bad football by Tony Fields. He like committed to a punt block he was never going to make and like put himself in a position where he couldn't do anything other than barrel into the punter. But the illegal hands to the face, whatever. But the pass interference, like,
oh, that was.
It just felt. Well, it was like it's weird. Because I don't remember who was coming. Was it Adam Archuleta who was on the? He's like super into all these calls. Like you can't do that. And then I'm watching these other games where it's like, all these guys are doing it. Like it just felt like a very cheap call. And the part of the problem is it was a 33-yard penalty for it. Like
and the fact, Pete, that you flipped field position because of the penalty that they got on special teams, where you gave them the ball back, and like all of those things happened consecutively. That then this felt like the dagger in the coffin. Right.
So that is how they scored their first touchdown. Their second touchdown was a one-play drive on a flea flicker that had nothing to do with Jamar Chase.
And by the way, the penalty that the pass interference penalty, like I guess what really bothered me about that, this is when I was like getting really mad, when I was like, okay, this game is annoyingly making me mad. It didn't even feel like he was trying to catch the ball. Like it didn't even feel like the ball was super catchable. It just feels like the Browns never get any benefit of the doubt. And I think we talked about this like pretty early on in our show, or maybe like it was a Twitter conversation that I saw maybe Ken Carman having with someone, where when you're bad, you typically don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? Like bad kids typically don't get the benefit of the doubt. Like they're always going to be blamed first over the quote unquote good kids. And that's what it feels like with the Browns. And then, me and my conspiracy theories start just spinning in my head of like, with Deshaun Watson being our quarterback now, are we being treated differently just in general? Because like, these are the things that I think about, where it's just like, no one wants to root for the Browns. And are we going to be looked at under a microscope for, I don't know, eternity in the end of time?
Certainly a possibility. But yeah, like it was, you get 53 yards in penalties. on a drive, you give 30 actual yards on the drive, and 15 of them to the player that the Browns didn't double, but actually had two guys covering on that play. They score. The other play, like I said, was a flea flicker to Trenton Irwin.
Yeah. Where did this guy come from?
Well, I mean,
football Jesus.
It's like, it's like the Anthony Schwartzes and David Bells that we have. You don't really see when your top dudes are getting the ball, but like, credit to the Bengals, they ran a good play. I don't know who the corner was on that play. Obviously, Grant Delpit gets a lot of heat because he was a safety. They hand the ball off, so he's going, "Oh, it's a run!" Charges downhill, and so they're wide open behind him. And they score an easy one. One play, 45 yards. Had nothing to do with Jamar Chase. They didn't score another touchdown in this game. They had 3 field goals. Like, that is sort of where that's where I have a tough time with. The defense made a crippling decision not to double Jamar Chase. And look, he had 10 catches for 18 yards in the game. Meanwhile, Donovan Peoples-Jones had 114 yards on 8 catches. He was never doubled. And in fact, on the interception that Deshaun Watson threw, he was wide open there too. He just threw it late and it got intercepted. He was open on the play that Jacoby Brissett tried to throw it to him. He was open, he's singled up on the fade that they tried to throw in the end zone at the end of the game. Like, he had a possibility of like up to 3 touchdowns in this game, 2 or 3, and 100 million yards. Like, nobody's going to go to Lou Anarumo. I think I'm saying his name right. Who's called one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, I think, legitimately, and going, well, they should have doubled Donovan Peoples-Jones. Defense is about making decisions, and their decision was, we're going to win line of scrimmage and send as much pressure as possible as Deshaun Watson and make him beat us. It didn't work, or I should say, it worked for the Bengals. The Browns couldn't score enough points, so they win. But Donovan Peoples-Jones still killed them. And by the way, I did write about this. He kills the Bengals, period. If you think of all the highlights in Donovan Peoples-Jones' career, almost all, like the vast majority of them, including his first ever against the Bengals. Yeah. The game-winning touchdown in 2020 as a rookie, the Bengals. He had 81. When they went down to Cincinnati, he caught a 60-yard touchdown when the Browns just destroyed the Bengals that year, 41-16. There he is again. 81 yards in the first matchup this year, including hurdling a defender, and then a career high 114 yards this game. He is a beast against the Bengals. I think it added up to 375 yards and 2 touchdowns in 5 games against the Bengals so far in his career. So, yeah, again, I think it's a valid criticism. I just think that it was overstated. And again, I think they could have done it in some spots. I think they could have done more to help. The one where I sort of like was sitting there going, that was a bad look, is where John Johnson ended up on him. He did stop him, but it was just like, oof, let's not have that happen.
Yeah, Pete. I mean, where do we even go from here? Actually, one point I do want to bring up. It's funny because watching this game and like having a minute to reflect on it, I think about, and when I like go online, which like is the worst place you could ever go after a Browns game, like win or lose, there's always something to fight about, which is entertaining if that's something that you enjoy. But when I go through and like look at all the responses that are out there and the conversations that are happening, it is just mind-boggling to me how we all watch the same game and come away with so many different things, criticisms, what you want to happen, what you think happened. And I walked away from that game thinking and feeling very hopeful that Deshaun Watson is going to get things figured out. And just in watching him play his first game back versus that game, I was like, wow, like he did so much better. And then you have people on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, I cannot believe we paid $230 million for this. I had to laugh today because I saw someone comment, because I had tweeted out something like, with the Browns not pretty much having any chance to make the postseason, does this take the pressure off of the Browns, or does it actually magnify what needs to happen in these final few games to get the offense and Deshaun Watson in sync, essentially? And so I was just curious, like, how people felt about that, because I do, like, I'd love to know your thoughts on that too. And it might be maybe a little bit of both. But someone had responded and said, there's a lot of people saying like, fire Kevin Stefanski. He's not the right coach for this job. We've heard that kind of all season, regardless of who the quarterback is the last couple of years. I just have to laugh because people are saying that we've wasted another year of Miles.
I will
and
read
Chubb.
you. I will read you Daryl Ryder's reaction the day after.
Okay, go ahead.
I
Read
could
it to
not
me.
stop laughing. This was his like lead into his column or whatever. Another wasted opportunity, and that for that matter, season. But that's what the Browns do: waste years and careers.
Yes, I do remember reading that. Yes, waste years and years. That's a
I
good
couldn't
line,
stop
though.
laughing. I just couldn't.
Props to Daryl. I really like that. That's a really good line. I mean, that's like an attention grabber. So I mean, the good job. That was he did his job.
Yes.
And I had someone kind of respond in a similar way to me, and I just sat there and I was like, okay, I understand if you want to say like we wasted another year of Miles and Chubb in their prime, but one could argue that we would have wasted their entire career in a Browns uniform because clearly this front office did not think that what we had at quarterback last year
very important
was going to be enough to ever make a run at a Super Bowl. So waste a year, waste in quotations, or have them play their entire career for nothing, because like that's what you have to think about. Like and right now with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns and 2 games into his career of what should be a very long career with the Browns, it's too early to say if this is a waste, right? Because like we don't know what's going to happen, but you could say that the last 4 years were a waste, with all things considering. And if you go back to last year, there was no end in sight. What were we going to do? It's either you have Baker Mayfield as your quarterback. They weren't going to pay him that money. You don't have the draft picks to go draft a quarterback. Like, what other options other than signing free agents? Like, the Browns did, in their opinion, what the best option that was out there, whether you agree with it or not. Like, to me, they made the best decision for their team. And it's really hard to, I think, look at that right now because we are in the moment of not great football and a very disappointing season. But I also think we have to level set what this was all about. And it's way too early to start throwing everything into a fire and burning it all down again, Pete. I just don't think that's going to happen. As much as people complain and go off on Twitter or whatever they want to do, write Facebook comments on the Cleveland Browns Facebook page. I don't know. Go do what you need to do. I don't think we're going to see any changes when it comes to Kevin Stefanski as a head coach. And I think they are going to have the patience to see this through.
Okay, so I couldn't stop laughing through that for 2 reasons.
Why?
One, you just rattled off like the first 4 or 5 paragraphs of a column I wrote this week about this for this exact thing. But the other thing was the idea that 2 games is enough. No, we're good. 2 games. That was it. 2 games of Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing right now?
So,
like, wait. 1 second. We literally went through an entire year of a one-armed Baker Mayfield, and people were like, no, we got to give him a whole other year. And then right now, we are willing to throw in the towel after 2 games and paying someone $230 million. Like, what are we doing, people? What are we doing?
Yes. But you're right. That's exactly the thing. The Browns made a fundamental choice at the end of 2021. They decided Baker Mayfield is not the guy. And they go, okay, now what? And to this question, I have yet to get an answer. Find me a better path forward than the one they take, because there are 2 fundamental options. One, look, the Browns, I cannot state this enough, and people don't want to believe it. It happened. The Browns back-channeled Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Both of them told no. And based on what the Browns had at that time, I do not blame them. At the time, they had David Njoku, who hadn't proven enough. And they had Donovan Peoples-Jones, who at that point, I doubt Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers knew who he was. They did not have Amari Cooper. And even if they did, you just saw them sort of go through Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, and you're going, were they good?
Right.
These top of the line quarterbacks, at least what we thought, said no. And it was like, Denver was a sweet situation for Russell Wilson. It hasn't worked, but it was a great situation. Aaron Rodgers has basically bullied the Packers 2 years in a row to get everything he wants and got it. And both of those situations, you're sitting there going, woo, I'm glad the Browns didn't do that.
Exactly.
So your choice at that point was to pursue Deshaun Watson. And again, I'm not going to defend the off field. Neither of us are going to defend that. You feel how you feel about it. That's fine. I'm not going to say you're wrong. What I would say is Deshaun Watson was the guy who was available. And what we're finding out, and I sort of knew some of this stuff already, even though, again, people didn't want to listen to it. Kevin Stefanski went down to, as Aditi Kinkhabwala said, went down to Deshaun Watson's lawyer's office the second he was acquitted or charges weren't brought.
Right.
And met with Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Deshaun Watson, like Kevin Stefanski has been the point man who has sold this thing to Deshaun Watson. Now, if you did not go that route, you either do another year with Baker Mayfield. I think that's what would have happened, or gotten somebody else. Let's say it was Jacoby Brissett. Let's say it was Jimmy Garoppolo. Whoever. None of those guys are the answer. So you are still going to have to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
So either you were sitting there going, we'll wait a year and hope another top tier veteran is available that somebody doesn't want, or we're going to have to trade up a whole bunch of draft picks to go get a rookie. And a rookie would require the amount of time a rookie takes.
Yeah. So then more years wasted.
Yes. So naturally, you are sitting there going, well, here's years 2 and 3, and we're hoping this rookie's going to pan out. Or maybe you get maybe you get a veteran. We'll see if a veteran gets traded this offseason. Maybe the Raiders decide we're done with Derek Carr. Okay. But like this time last year, people were going, oh, we'll just go get Kirk Cousins. 1, I didn't want him. But 2, are the Vikings in a hurry to get rid of him? Now it seems like they feel pretty good about him. So you could have gotten to this point and been like, I don't have anything. The Browns took what they knew was available. They got their guy and they lost a year. 2022 was the year of Deshaun Watson, even though he was not playing most of it. And the 6 games, as you rightfully point out, are the season. Like, I hate that we had to do 11 games of like, hopefully things work out and we're in a position to potentially make the postseason, but they didn't. And you're sitting there going, okay, I can watch some of these young guys get better. Myles Garrett still playing unbelievable. Nick Chubb is great. Joe Bitonio, another great year to say, here's a Hall of Fame, add to his Hall of Fame resume and all this, that, and the other. When you look at it, who are the guys most fired up with Deshaun Watson? Myles Garrett is fired up about Deshaun Watson. Joe Bitonio, as fired up as Joe Bitonio gets, is excited about Deshaun Watson, even though he loves Jacoby Brissett. Like, you watch these press conferences and it's like, it does not feel like they are going through the motions when they say, like when they're saying, we know he's not, he's going to take a little time to get there, but we're really excited. We're really confident what he's going to be. It does not feel forced. It does not feel like guys going through the motions. And what is Myles Garrett saying coming out of this one? Even though the Browns have like a 1% chance or 10% chance, depending on where you look, we're going to go into every game trying to go 1-0 because they understand what this is about and they've got a clear direction going forward. They didn't have that coming out of 2021. It was a lot of, like you said, where are we going from here? And that's huge. So 2022 is unfortunate. Like we've talked about this. It sucks to tell a fan base to be like, wait another year. And the fans are like, well, we've waited a quarter century. And like, it's not fun. There's no other way to put it. It's not fun. But now you're going to head into 2023 and be like, okay, well, they've got some things to work out. There's pressure. Kevin Stefanski has to be that guy as the head coach. Andrew Berry's got to deliver as the front office. They've got to make these things happen. But you also feel like there's pressure because they can do well, not there's pressure because we're just tired of them. Like, there is legitimate pressure. You need to make the playoffs because you now have all of these things in place. It's all set up for you. Let's make it happen. And that's why I look at this and I say I'm enthusiastic coming out of this game. I'm optimistic because, one, I thought Deshaun Watson looked a lot better. And there are plays where it looked bad and there are plays where it looked really good. That play where he's getting his ankle held and throws the ball 24 yards in the air to Donovan Peoples-Jones on a cross, or some of the stuff where he's rolling out and finding guys down the field, like you're going, oh, this could be fun. And that took 2 weeks. Like you're sitting there and I wrote this, like, I think the Browns can win the last 4. I think they can win all of them. Now, one of them is going to be brutally difficult in Washington. Washington's going to be tough. I don't think the Ravens are a gimme by any stretch. I think that will be tough, even if Anthony Brown is the quarterback. But they could win all of these games. And a lot of it is because I think Deshaun Watson's going to get more and more comfortable. And if it looks good, these guys are going to be, let's say they go 3-1. These players are going to be super fired up going into the offseason. And more importantly, free agents are going to be fired up. But if they win out, like everybody's so worried, well, they're eliminated from the playoffs in week, whatever we had, 14. Like this is huge failure. If they go 9-8, are we going to sit here and go, oh, this was such a crushing disaster? Or are we going to say, this is pretty good? Or 8-9, which is what I had them going. If they win the last 4, they will have won 6 of their last 7. If they go 3-1, it's 5 of their last 7. Like it's going in a better direction. You're seeing the defense improve. You're seeing the special teams improve. Like we talked about this when Deshaun Watson came back. There was an energy in that building. There was a lot of guys who were just fired up about what they were seeing. They were excited about this. And all of a sudden things started picking up. I think a lot of things just sort of started to click as well, just naturally by the progression of the season. But like when I've asked, what was their better path forward? What was the fastest path for them to contend, given the options at their disposal? There's no other answer unless you're basically saying, and again, I'm not going to argue with this and say, well, the person he is not worth the trouble. You win. I'm not going to, say that. But from a football perspective, I totally understand why the Browns did what they did, because it's really fast and it gets these guys excited. Myles Garrett's fired up because he's got direction. He's not sitting there going, well, what am I going to be doing for the next 3 or 4 years remaining in my contract? Joe Bitonio is sitting there going, 2020 was great, but that's the only success I've had. I've got all this stuff to look forward to. Like, I think that stuff super important. And I think these games, whether the playoffs are on the line or not, I think are important to this team. To answer your earlier question, I think they're really important, not just to I think they're important to the team. And like I said, when Myles Garrett's talking about, he's echoing what Kevin Stefanski's saying, which I also think is important. I don't think you lose sight of that. The fact he's going, we've got to go 1-0 every week. That is, Kevin Stefanski has been preaching that since he got here. Like, people are talking like him in terms of what you want. They're taking on that sort of the mentality. And Myles Garrett saying, and we still have no clarity on what the deal with his shoulder is, but him saying, if I can play, I'm going to play. Like, these things are important. Like, I think the players get it in a way that, like, again, there are segments of fans who get this, who are sort of like, I don't see sort of the world ending like some of the other people, the doomsday stuff or firing all these coaches or blowing it up. There are people who are sitting there going, we didn't think we were going to be good this year anyway. It was about getting to next year, and we can see the path forward. That's what this is about. So those 4 games matter. I think they're important to Deshaun Watson. Certainly Deshaun Watson's going to be sitting there. I wish there were, 5 more games, because obviously it's going to get him more ready to go, but it's important for these other guys. And the guys who are, this is where the advantage of having so many guys on contract extensions already is great. They don't have anywhere to go. Like, they're here. They're invested. They are signed on. Like David Njoku, he's ready to go. Amari Cooper, he's here for a couple more years. Both guards are here for years. Denzel Ward is here for years, and hopefully he can sort of rally on what has not been a great season for him. But Myles Garrett locked up. And then there are some guys who are sort of ending their contracts, and we'll see what happens. But like Jadeveon Clowney's fired up. Jack Conklin's press conference today was great. Like, he was super complimentary. I was really interested to listen to him say he was so happy with how the medical staff and the coaching staff handled his rehab. He felt so taken care of, I guess, but just the fact that they sort of understood what he was going to. And he said in past places he's been, like, or talking to other people, that everybody wants to just put you right on the back of the field and grind on you already. And he's like, no, they were patient with it. It helped me recover faster. And like, It's
Those things
probably
matter.
yes. Like
Those things matter.
and Jack Conklin's like, I want, maybe this is very good PR on his part, but he goes, Cleveland is home for me. Like, and I know Abby's somewhere. This is right up her alley. Saying something nice about, if it's saying something nice about Cleveland or supporting another Cleveland sport, done. But like him to say this is home for me and I want to stay here because of these things. Like people are like, oh, get rid of the coaching staff. No, players care about this stuff. Like it's hugely important. I've tried to think of a way to write about this and I can't do it because I have to do 1,000 things of this is speculation on my part or this is not a medical diagnosis. I think that the Browns are more conservative than a lot of teams with a handling of concussions. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like it's true based on some of the things they've done. Denzel Ward, everybody freaked out when he was out for several games with a concussion. And they like immediately going, oh, I don't know if he can continue his career. Greg Newsome, they held him out what felt like a week. Like if you recall, this was before Thanksgiving, and they did like a big fundraiser food drive type thing, and like players showed up. He had just suffered been put in concussion protocol that Friday, and this was on Tuesday. And he told Mary Kay Cabot, "Yeah, I feel 100 times better. I think I'm going to play this week." The Browns were like, "No, you're out another week." This is why I say I feel like they are taking a little bit more caution. And in case of Anthony Schwartz, which had a legitimately scary concussion last year, it's when they put him on IR, that immediately makes me worry. But I also sit there going, are they just being super cautious with this stuff? And the reason that this sort of jumped into my head, and again, this is where I have to be like, I don't have the information to say this definitively, but you go back to the Miami Dolphins and the Tua stuff, and where he got knocked woozy the one game, they go, he didn't actually have a concussion, and then he stays in that game, and he comes back the next week, and then he does get knocked out, and you're sitting there going, oof, that didn't look good. They probably should have played that game. Is that really fair? No, I can't say definitively that they mishandled it. It just didn't look right. Minnesota Vikings Christian Darrisaw was put in concussion protocol 1 week, came back, was cleared, came back the next week, put back in concussion protocol. Like, again, I can't say definitively that he wasn't cleared of having a concussion. All I can say is that is what happened, and it sort of looks weird. And it seems to me like the Browns are handling concussions a little more conservatively. And I think because of the science of concussions, which is evolving like constantly, it seems like this is this weird frontier that NFL teams are sort of having to figure out. And it seems like the Browns have taken a certain path, which again, I think may be something the players are like, I get it. Even though, players are sort of wired up to this idea of, I got to be on the field or I'm going to risk losing my job. There seems to be some sort of care taken that in a way that makes players, one, get healthier and truly recovered, and then two, in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're being put in a position where they're going to suddenly lose their job.
Well, yeah, I think any employee of a company, regardless of what your profession is, wants to be treated like a human and truly feel like they're being looked after, cared about, and taken care of. I don't think this would be any different if you're an NFL player. And look, the Browns have not the greatest reputation in terms of consistency, turnover, culture, whatever you want to say. Cleveland has not been a free agent destination, whether that is the actual team, whether that's the place, the weather. I don't know. It's not like a place that is highly sought after that players are seeking to go to. Any positives that can come out of this team, in my opinion, all the better, whether that is the players that you have on your roster, the medical staff, things like this. I think it does matter. And to me, fans want to talk about culture and what that looks like. Well, that would be a part of it. Like, this is part of the culture. it's not just what you hear at press conferences and what happens in the locker room. It's all of these things as well. Like if there is a chance that a player can go to a team and they know that they're going to be treated as a human and not as a transaction, then I think Cleveland becomes a much higher priority for players than maybe before.
Well, Nicole will know this because we talked about it extensively. But the Browns, when Andrew Berry came back to be the GM, he hired a guy named Ron Brewer. And Ron Brewer is like, not a guy that a lot of people know, but he's a legend in that building because he's like a player liaison. They call him, Big Bro, all this other stuff. He's like the guy that, like, if you have a problem with something, life or otherwise, he's the guy you go talk to. He's the guy who sort of gets you. He's the first guy, basically the first guy you will talk to if you're a player walking into that building. And like, it's that stuff. It's that quality of life enhancement that they have been really efforting to try to improve. And players like are very appreciative of this, and it is paying off. And to your point, it is the city in part. God bless Cleveland. If you live in Northeast Ohio, you love it, but like it's an acquired taste for a lot of people. And it's weird because you do have people who sing it. Charles Barkley loves Cleveland. Loves it. Can't remember the name of the Italian restaurant he loves here, but he loves Cleveland. Like, and you get all these players who will like come here and be like, I don't know what people were saying about this. Like, I think it's great. And a lot of them, like, some of them end up living here full time because of that. So it's always interesting. But yeah, like if you're just comparing it to Miami or Los Angeles, and some of this,
right, exactly.
Some of this depends on sort of like where you are in your life, I guess, and how you're sort of wired a little bit. But like, you've got Miami, you've got Las Vegas now, you've got Los Angeles, and you've got the whole state tax, consideration, how much, whether that really matters or not. You look at a place like Denver and you're going, yeah, it's cold, but 300 days of sun, and it's pretty close to, all these other things. Or it's like Cleveland is a challenge in the same way that Cincinnati is sort of a challenge. It's not like a destination. But it's one of those things where, like, again, it's an acquired taste for a lot of people. But and that's why, circling back, these 4 games matter. I think because of the roster they have and because of Deshaun Watson. If Deshaun Watson plays well in these last games, it's going to get free agents excited. And like people might side eye that and go, well, how do they feel about? Here's how they and their agents feel about Deshaun Watson. He means money, because if they come here and they succeed, one, if they're an offensive player, they go, oh, I can go catch a bunch of passes or do this and the other thing, have a bunch of success. Maybe I win a Super Bowl or contend, but that's going to make more money for me maybe if I sign somewhere else or whatever. Defensively, if the offense is what the Browns hope it to be, it's going to produce more predictable situations. If the Browns are up 20 points or 14 points or whatever, it's going to change how the other team has to play. You are going to be able to be more focused on obvious passing situations, which is going to make you a better player when you don't have to think about having to stop the run. You're just sitting going, oh, I got to just rush the passer. I've got to go cover this guy or whatever. It makes your life easier. Winning helps, but like Deshaun Watson, they could not like him or have major questions of him off the field and still sign here because of what it means. NFL careers are finite. Get it while you can get it, and that becomes a powerful motivator. And obviously Deshaun Watson is polarizing to fans. I think he's more popular than people want to realize among players, especially before all of this went down. But even now, you saw Houston, he had a lot of support from players there. They were not afraid to sort of embrace him or whatever. Like a lot of people are like already assuming that Brandon Cooks is going to sign here in the offseason because of that relationship. But we saw this with 2 players already. Jadeveon Clowney said flat out, I wanted to play wherever Watson was going. And then the other one that people forget is when Jarvis Landry got released. Jarvis Landry was trying to be part of a package that ended up with either Watson in New Orleans or Watson in Atlanta. And he was going to go there to follow Watson. And again, I'm not suggesting anyone I don't like Jarvis Landry anymore because he approves of Watson, but he sort of understands what that means. And and the value of that. Those players are not going to be alone. There are going to be players that sit there and go, oh, Deshaun's in Cleveland. I'm at least going to listen. I'm at least going to, I'm going to hear what they have to say. And, for the premier free agents that are going to be out there this coming offseason, they're going to get their money wherever they go. But Deshaun Watson may open the door and get a conversation that otherwise they may not have had. That's the power of what he brings. And certainly guys like Myles Garrett and all these other players that they have are major selling points, but it starts with the quarterback. It's so important to have one of those guys, and the Browns have it. And you're also going to get potentially, guys, Clowney's an example. He took less to play with him. Reportedly was offered 3 years, $45 million to go sign with the Jets and stayed here for less than 10. But I think you're going to, a guy like Jerry Hughes, who terrorized the Browns when they played the Houston Texans, might be somebody where they go, okay, you want to come in for a reasonable amount of money that we can afford. Like, we can work this thing out. You get those guys. So these games matter. They matter. Even if fans are sort of like, personally, I think these are the most exciting games of the year, because if they can win these games, they're going to get more and more excited. Like I said, I think 4-0 is a possibility. I think that would be a whole lot of fun for people to get excited about 2023. And more importantly, just bring a level of sanity back to to Cleveland as a sports town.
So you think there is pressure on the last 4 games, or not? Maybe pressure isn't the right word. What would you call it?
I don't think pressure is an unfair word. I think pressure, I think it matters for all the reasons you just mentioned, like people already getting this, the Browns wasted $230 million. I think I don't think it's pressure because of those people. I think it's pressure because Deshaun Watson's sitting there going, they gave up $230 million. They traded 6 draft picks, and they were willing to eat a season for me. And in order to pay, and it's not even like sort of like pay it back, so to speak, like he owes them something, even though he really does. I think it's more along the lines of living up to what that means. Like I said, you hear him talk, and we'll get into this. His press conferences are great. I don't know how they couldn't find a way to get this Deshaun to deal with some of the other stuff that would have made all of this so much easier. But whether it's him or Myles Garrett's not worried about, like, people are like, oh, Myles Garrett wants to leave because fans don't like. Myles Garrett is a really harsh critic of Myles Garrett. Like Denzel Ward is a harsh enough critic on Denzel Ward. Like, most of these guys are harder on themselves than the fans can be. That doesn't mean I approve of how fans boo them or how they treat them. Like, they are people, but for the most part, these guys are super hard on themselves. So I think they are putting pressure on themselves for these last 4 weeks. Or 4 games. So I don't think you run away from that word. I think if the Browns go 2-2, I think it will be a little disappointing. What does that really mean? I don't know, but I think avoiding a double-digit loss season is important. I do think that matters. I do think, like, so many people are sort of worried about this downward trend of going from the 11-5 playoff year to 8-9 last year to they're sitting there thinking, oh, of course they're already 5-12. That does matter. I think avoiding that feeling of it's just getting worse and worse does matter. I think there is pressure on that. I think there's pressure because of perceived necessary coaching changes.
Yes.
Beyond Kevin Stefanski. I think for the people who are pitchforks in hand for Joe Woods and Mike Prefer, I think there's pressure for them to deliver. But and I still am entertained by the people who are like, no, they have to fire them. Like, coaches don't work like that. Kevin Stefanski is not like excited to fire these guys, if that's what it comes down to. But so for all those reasons, I do think there's pressure. I do think it matters. I do think Saturday is a big game for the Browns. I do think, and they play the Steelers again. I do think them the Saints, which should be the easiest game they have left, there is pressure on them to. That's a home game. Like they've got 2 home games left. If they can win these next 2, let's say they beat Baltimore, it's at home. That would be a huge lift. They beat the Saints. They would have won the last 3 home games to finish the year, and then they finished the last 2 on the road. One of those is against the Steelers. Again, another game where like if you lose, we lose our minds, and like firings happen and all this other stuff. And then, like I said, I think it's hard to frame it like this, but I do think Washington is like the Browns Super Bowl in so many ways because they're really good right now, and I think they're a really tough matchup, especially if the offensive line is playing as poorly as it is. Hopefully, Posick will be back by then, but I do think that there is a lot on the table for them.
Yeah, I just hope we get to see an offense that's a little loose, like open it up a little bit, like no pressure in terms of playoffs, right? So like, let's have some fun. Let's see what this could look like moving forward.
I think it's that, but I think that also is more of a and this has been the funniest part about this week to me is you've got the people who are like really mad at Kevin Stefanski for being aggressive. And there's another thought process from like hardcore analytics people why aren't you being more aggressive?
Yeah.
And to me, I'm more inclined to be in the latter camp. Like I look at you going for 4th and 1. I was like, yeah, let's do more of that. What do you have to lose at this point? Let's put pressure on the other team to respond to you rather than sort of like trying to eke your way out. It doesn't mean you have to be reckless with it, but I think being aggressive and putting pressure on them has a real value for this. And I think you saw some of that. So like, one of the things that I've noticed about the last 2 games with Deshaun Watson is the last drive before the half, both games. And I really appreciated Kevin Stefanski's approach with this. They had this past week, they had 25 seconds left and 1 timeout. Kevin Stefanski could have easily said, let's kneel it, take it to the locker room and move on. And he did this both Houston and in Cincinnati, where this is an opportunity to get my quarterback reps. He needs all the work he can get. Let's get him reps. And he completes 2 passes. They get to the 50-yard line. They get up there and spike it. It's a 2-minute situation. You get to practice that stuff. And obviously you get this. I was fascinated by the camera work here. Whoever did the director of the game this week did a great job for his sake of just having the camera sit on poor Cade York, who's desperately lobbying to kick the 68-yard field goal, only to be turned down. One, thankfully, they didn't do it because I just envisioned it being blocked, picked up, and scored. But you got to throw the Hail Mary, and it was closer than I think the Bengals were ready for it to be. But like, I like the approach of 2 weeks in a row, you're sitting there going drive before the half. Maybe we don't get anything but this, but Deshaun can use all the reps he can get.
Yeah. Air it out, Pete. Air it out. I'm ready for it.
And then in the second half, that's really where you saw it. Obviously they go down. Oh, they did score 3 touchdowns. I'm an idiot. They score a touchdown. They go up 20-3. And then all of a sudden it's like, screw it, let's go. And all of a sudden, and everybody's like, oh, they're down 20-3. It doesn't really count because it's garbage time or whatever. I don't care if it was on air. Deshaun Watson needed to score a touchdown. And the drive they ran was great. He was 7 of 8 on that drive.
Yeah.
He ran one, but it was just good stuff. And and that included the 3 plays to David Njoku in a row that were just awesome. I think one of those was the 4th and 5, I believe. 4th and 5. It looked like it was just a routine play. They easily complete it, pick it up. They go right back to him. He gets 13 more yards. And then he gets that shallow cross and just runs all the way and then dives into the pylon. And all so many people are saying, 8 quarters, 1 touchdown. I think that was monumental for Deshaun Watson. And you can say all of this about $230 million and he's not where he needs to be. I think that was a massive weight off his shoulders to just get that first one.
I would agree with that. Yes, that felt very important.
But beyond that, to your point, you're saying air it out. Let's see what this offense looks like. You did see some more things, a little more breadcrumbs in terms of what they're going to be. I saw pistol, which I didn't think we'd see this year. They ran the option, legitimately ran the triple option. And then my favorite play of the game was well, there were two that really stood out to me. The third and 8, where he threw, and I mentioned this earlier, the 24-yard pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones, which is just fantastic. You're sitting there going, that's why you're here. And then the other one was the Browns showed screen working to the left. All of the Bengals defensive linemen immediately reacted, go, oh, crap, it's a screen. They all fly out. Deshaun Watson rolls to the right. There's a defender that has to sort of pick him up, or Deshaun's going to run. He easily just finds Donovan Peoples-Jones, dumps it over the head, and they get a massive gain. It was just like, that's, to me, what you're going to see this offense become, and the amount of pressure that Deshaun Watson can put on an opponent. So, like, again, you get the touchdown, you get that. All this stuff matters, and ultimately what you ended up with, and I get it, it was 23-10. You're going, they lost by 2 scores. They had 3 opportunities in the second half to come away with touchdowns. We mentioned the interception, and then the Donovan Peoples-Jones fade play in the end zone on 4th down they didn't get. I don't like end zone fades in general, but Deshaun Watson's a good passer that throws that type of ball well. I was a little, disappointed that Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't high point it. He let it get into his chest. But I'm glad, I like that they let him go up and take shot. I like that they are. We've sort of talked about. I like that they are pushing the boundary of what he can do, and just adding to it. And I was struck by just how devastated Peoples-Jones was.
Oh, I know.
And my initial reaction was, oh, crap, he's hurt, because he was just crushed.
He was. I know. That was heartbreaking because he's played his butt off this year.
Right.
And he typically is very reliable. I call him Mr. Reliable, because that's what he's been. And so my heart just broke for him.
But yeah, and this is a game where Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably sitting there thinking about that, and he 114 yards receiving. And the thing about the 114 yards, and this is another, we talked about this before, the Buffalo Bills game, where it's like Jacoby Brissett threw for 324, and it's like, it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like Deshaun threw for 276. It didn't feel like Donovan Peoples-Jones had 114. It just sort of happened. And that's like what you want. You don't want it to feel like it's you're working so hard to get there. That was a pleasant surprise. You got 114 out of him. You got 59 out of Njoku. Obviously, Cooper had the 2 catches. One of them was very good, but he's dealing with the hip. But again, you're starting to see that the flashes of what's to come. Now, I got a text from you after the game, who you acknowledged something you weren't really comfortable acknowledging. How did you feel about a certain quarterback right now?
Yeah, I did text Pete because I was listening to the post-game press conference, which I do typically do, albeit distracted. And I was listening to him talk about the game. We talked about this last week. Like, it was endearing again.
Yes, he's good.
And I said to Pete, I knew this is exactly what was going to happen. Like, if I was going to continue being a fan of this football team, like, I knew that was going to happen. And I don't know if anyone else feels this way, or maybe they're not willing to admit it, because like, if you don't like him, that's fine. Like, I totally understand that. I totally get that. Like, not condoning anything about any of the off-field stuff that happened, didn't happen. I don't know. None of us know. I'm just saying, when you listen to him in a vacuum talk about football, I understand why he was so celebrated as an athlete / quarterback, and why people really liked him as a teammate, because he's very smart, seems very humble, honestly, when you just listen to him talk about football specifically. And I just kind of hated myself a little bit for that, Pete. Not gonna lie.
I'm right there with you. It's conflicting.
It's yes. Very conflicting. And I felt this way from day one, I think. Of just like knowing there were people that put a stake in the ground and said, I will not be a football fan of the Cleveland Browns. Like, I'm done. I'm gonna walk away from being a fan of this team. I totally respect that. I have no problem with that. I just knew for myself personally, I wasn't going to make that decision. Like, I just wasn't willing to say, like, something that I enjoy, something that is entertainment value to me. I knew that I would never be able to stop watching them. I wouldn't be able to stop talking about them. So it felt very ingenuine or disingenuine for me to say that and put that stake in the ground when I knew that there was no chance that was actually going to happen. And so I spent, the months of March to July feeling weird about everything. Like if I talked about the Browns, people were going to attack me. If I didn't talk about the Browns, people were going to attack me. Any opinion I had about this football team or the quarterback or anything at all, it was like I wouldn't be able to win, especially as a female, right?
Mhm.
Because how dare you as a female? Like how dare you feel this way? Meanwhile, there's a million men that nobody cares about what they think. But and funny I should say that, Pete, because nobody wanted to respect my opinion when it came to anything football related or sports related up until the Cleveland Browns signed Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. And then all of a sudden my opinion matters, right? Now all of a sudden everyone is going to be critical of me. Yeah, it's been a very weird year of being a Cleveland Browns football fan and just very conflicted internally. And I've been very careful about my thoughts and feelings on all of it because I know that not everybody shares those same thoughts and feelings. And as I mentioned, I respect people's opinions and viewpoints on all of it. But I also know that the internet is the internet. And what I put out there on the internet can cause a lot of unwarranted and shit I just don't need in my life. So if you listen to this podcast, you're going to know my thoughts and feelings on all of it. But these are things I will not put out on the internet to be attacked over. So, Pete, you got it out of me on this podcast.
Well,
how long are we in? 1 hour and 20 minutes. And so no one's going to be listening at this point. So it won't matter.
Then again, I get smatterings of support where people respond to something and go, well, just respond as if I have known all along that they listen to the podcast, which I really do appreciate. That's very sweet.
Yeah.
But to your point, I as you know, I've always hated the fact that the NFL has treated women by saying, "Oh, here's something pink. Shut up."
Exactly. Yeah.
So yes, 100% to your point to be like, "Oh, this thing happened. Tell me how to feel about it."
Yes.
But I'm with you. It's challenging, and like I said, I don't know how some way somehow they didn't get this Deshaun Watson to somehow answer some questions.
I'm with you. I'm with you. It is a bit perplexing. That's my word of the podcast, word of the week. He is very endearing when it comes to football press conferences, but to your point, they couldn't get this version of him about anything that dealt with the personal side of everything that went down. I don't it is mind-boggling.
Because to your point, this is a guy, you listen to the post-game press conference. And by the way, you mentioned this before about how he has crazy memory. There was one, so often you get a player who go or coach who go, I got to look at the tape. And, a lot of the time they remember, but they may not remember enough, or they just don't want to answer at that point. Somebody asked him about a particular, I think it may have been the interception, but a particular play. He's like, no, I should have done this. The corner was doing this. The safety was doing this. There was a backer here. And he rattled it off effortlessly.
Yeah.
And you see the guy that was beloved at Clemson, that was beloved at Houston. And I don't know how they couldn't find a way to get that, because if he spoke it's obviously you're not going to get this joyful reaction.
Right.
But even in the press conference, he's not talking like
it's
a joyful
rehearsed.
person. But it just feels very.
It's just it's just genuine
authentic,
and authentic and genuine, which I think is what people want and are looking for. And yes, all of his previous press conferences, obviously they were not about football, but they were very rehearsed and practiced. And I get it. I understand, because those aren't easy things to talk about, and the subject matter is very sensitive. I think the Browns tried to minimize being triggering, to be honest with you. Sure. I truly feel like they were trying to minimize adding more publicity to a situation that was already really, really difficult. And they knew that they were not going to win regardless of what they said. So But yes, I think just in listening to him, and maybe Pete, this is just being a fan of a team whose quarterback play has obviously been very inconsistent over the years, decades, whatever you want to call it. It always felt like our quarterbacks were extremely defensive, maybe deflective in a sense, not super humble. And so I think in just the fact of like he didn't play perfect, he hasn't played perfect. He acknowledges that and he talks about it and talks about how he's going to correct it versus turning around and maybe pointing blame or taking offense to it. So like that's I just want honesty and transparency in my football players and team.
But I think you hit on something really important in the way he's answering questions, because we have had guys who are like, no, I've got to play better.
Yes.
Baker Mayfield, like people would always say he never took accountability for anything. He constantly would come out and go, I got to play better. I got to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But Deshaun Watson, and some of this is, I think in some ways he's getting the benefit of the doubt relative to where he is, but he tells you exactly what he needs to do better, how he's going to do it, and how the team's going to sort of get better. He gives you sort of like, if you were
belief.
He's convincing in the sense of like, if you're a boss and you're going to an employee and you're going, why, what happened to the Johnson account? And like Deshaun Watson gives you this, we're not there yet, but I'm taking steps A, B, and C. And you're going like, I may not be happy with it, but at least I sort of have an understanding of this plan of attack on where it's going to go. He gives you sort of a satisfying answer. It's not just like, no, it didn't get it done. I've got to be better. Like, where you sitting there going,
not generic.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a whole lot of place to go. So I think that's where it is. He gives you sort of that next step where it's sort of like, how does it get better? And what am I going to see from this? And he gives you very specific answers to this on how it's going to improve and why you should believe in that. And obviously and this is why I mentioned this, is because like whether it's coaches or players, people love accountability.
Exactly.
Until it's about 5 times of the accountability and they're like, just fix it.
Yes,
I'm tired of this. And it's just, I'm tired of hearing how you're going to do it better, because I've heard this with Kevin Stefanski, like even today, where people are like, I'm tired of hearing I've got to do a better job in all this. So yeah, it's fascinating that his press conferences in the summer were hateable. Yes. Hateable is the word I would use to describe that. He made himself a hateable individual in the way he handled it, because it was as if he was not even a human being at that point. And you're seeing the exact opposite. And it's still conflicting, but I can see at least see why people are in his camp and sort of get it.
And this is the last thing I will say about it, but do you remember how mad we all got? And I say we, like maybe myself included a little bit in this, of Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, Jimmy Haslam, when they had to speak on giving him this contract, bringing him to this football team, they all brought up how they talked to him, how they felt comfortable with him, their conversations, him as a person. Like they made sure that it was known that they felt really good about his character and who he was as a person. And obviously we see him in the media's eyes in press conferences on a football level perspective. But when you think about all the things that the organization and the leaders in the organization have said, I can see why, Pete.
Sure.
They felt that way in just how he comes across in press conferences. Like now I get why they brought that up and talked about it in the initial hire, because I can understand how he probably even was with them.
Agreed. I think he's got sort of an understated charisma about him. It's not like I think he walks into the room and he's sort of confident in who he is, but it doesn't feel like it's
threatening / arrogant.
Yeah, it's not flamboyant. Like it's, like I said, understated. He's confident in a humble manner. So 2 Northeast Ohio legends were asleep last Thursday night when Baker Mayfield led
me and my son.
Well, I was gonna say you and Myles Garrett. As Baker Mayfield led the Rams to beat the Raiders. Suck it, BB. This is phenomenal because you and I were sort of in the same camp. Like, I don't like one. I like Baker. I'm just gonna say I like Baker Mayfield. I root for him to succeed. I don't have a problem with and like I sort of look at it and go, the Browns where they are now could not be here without what they got from Baker Mayfield. Like, they wouldn't have Kevin Stefanski here, and they wouldn't be in a position they are now. Like, he did a lot for this team that went 1-31 to now being in a position where they can potentially contend. So, and he won the playoff game. Like, we haven't done that since the 90s, and they're so I'm sort of grateful for him, even though I'm disappointed it worked out. And I would say Baker Mayfield got a fairer shot than most ever will in the NFL. So to be like, well, it wasn't fair to him given the shoulder injury. He got a much fairer shot than most anyone else gets in this league. So he goes to Carolina. He's traded. He gets cut there. Now the Browns are going to get a 5th round pick rather than a 4th round pick because of the conditions of the pick. He gets cut. There are any number of people who are taking a victory lap going, Baker Mayfield sucks. This is the end of him. He's going to, he's just going to disappear. He gets picked up by the Rams. The story behind this is fascinating, where he bought a plane ticket to Los Angeles before it was official, betting that this was going to happen. He gets there. He's there for 44 hours. He studies, does everything else. And then he goes down in the game. Like, even the first couple of plays, I was like, wow, this is better than I thought it would be. And I'm sort of like, this is interesting. I don't know if it, I part of me was thinking, oh, okay, it's going to eventually, be too much,
fall apart.
And then, like, you and Myles Garrett are asleep. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 drives of the game, like, they just won. It took a lot of effort to get in the first touchdown.
Yes,
including converting a 4th and 1, I think. But they get there, and you're sitting going, okay, they got the touchdown. It was clunky. They're not going to do anything else. The defense gets a quick stop. They get the ball back at their own 2-yard line, 98 yards to go, which the distance John Elway had to cover to beat the Browns under 2.
They did get some
minutes.
help with penalties, though. Come on, let's be fair.
Yeah, no, 98 yards to go, no timeouts, under 2 minutes. Yes, there were some penalties. But I'm going to give him the penalties because he has been there for 44 hours.
Yeah,
it's
fair.
Still really impressive. Like, and it's not like he was throwing to the Rams' best receivers.
Yeah,
like, because they're out for the year. Like, they have arguably the best receiver in the entire league out for the year. Their second best guy out for the year. It is Skoranek, which
but that's when Baker thrives. Let's be real. Come on.
What it felt like to me is he had like 4 Rashard Higgins surrounding him.
Yes.
He is better, seemingly better with like the dumpster gang. And he throws that pass to Skoranek, who makes a great play. He makes some plays to Tutu Atwell, and then he makes that final. And I still can't believe the Raiders played press man on this, but he throws that ball to Van Jefferson, perfect ball. Van Jefferson makes the play. It is as if they've been doing this for months,
right. Mm-hmm.
And they win the game. And like, not only was that great, but the other part of this was great. Was he goes on the Amazon Prime stage thing afterwards, their post-game show, and who is there? None other than one Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman, who trashed Baker Mayfield this week. Not his first rodeo with Baker Mayfield. If you recall, back when Richard Sherman played, yes, he lied about Baker Mayfield. He's claimed, he didn't shake my hand. And then video easily proved, quickly, I might add, that Baker Mayfield did in fact shake his hand. And yet, one, I don't think Baker knew, but there was never any mea culpa on one Richard Sherman's part about all he talked about Baker Mayfield doing that. But look, all these people are like, because this is what fascinates me is the amount of people who are like mad about this or were rooting against Baker. I don't get it. And 2, what difference does it make? If he never throws a pass in the NFL again, this was awesome. Like, if you wrote this as a movie, people would not believe you. It would, this is stupid. This would never happen. This was great for him. It's a great moment. if he's in TV next year, I don't care. It was fun. It made a bet. Part of the reason you probably went to sleep was it was a bad football game to watch.
Yes. The only reason that I wanted to even tune in on Thursday Night Football was the chance of seeing Baker Mayfield play. Like that,
Right.
that was where I was at. I thought it was a great story. I don't understand why people want to see him fail, other than like wanting to prove themselves right or the Browns right or whatever it is. It was so good to see him smiling again because like I do think Baker, like he's a very likable guy. He has a big personality. And I felt like his confidence last year was obviously shot. And then going to Carolina and kind of seeing how things played out there, which he was also put into a horrible situation down there as well, very unstable. So you go from, you know, some ups and downs with the Browns to then another rocky situation in Carolina. And then I understand he wanted a chance. And this was another chance. And I was happy to see him succeed. Only thing that I was salty about was the fact that he didn't have as many of those game-winning drives in Cleveland. He had a lot of opportunities for them. So I guess it just turned out with Baker, he needed to be less prepared in those situations, right?
Well, but the thing was, it captured the same energy as that Jets game.
Yep, I know.
It really felt like fans didn't leave. The 35 Rams fans that were there that were surrounded by an ocean of Raiders fans, they stayed and were like super pumped. But my thing with Baker Mayfield, he makes football more fun. That's just it. Like if this is a game to have fun, Baker Mayfield is fun. And again, I don't care if he goes into TV from here or doesn't do this again. I'm not proclaiming that this is going to resurrect his career and he's going to be a great quarterback. Maybe there's a path for him to be able to take a Geno Smith type route. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line, like, because this was the thing, is like, well, what's he going to do the next 3 games? I don't care. Like, it's not my problem. I just watched the game and it was fun because he was in it and got to do these things. So happy for him. There are a lot of people who are sort of happy for him. A lot of Oklahoma fans who were very happy for him based on who liked and retweeted stuff I said. And then there were some people who mysteriously had tweets deleted, which just made it even more hilarious that this like he might as well play. It's as if he planted a flag on a certain part of the fan base's heart, and it will never go away. So I thought it was great. Anyway, we've run really long on this one, which is fun. Like I said, there was a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. As always, you can like, subscribe. We're on YouTube, all those good things. Reviews are great. Tell a friend. And we'll see what the Browns do against the Ravens this week. Should be fun. Saturday game. I don't like flex scheduling, but whatever. We will be back next week to talk about it. Hopefully, Deshaun Watson continues to get better and they come away with a win.